Hello and welcome to Daily Podcast number 23. Today I just wanted to give a brief overview, an introduction to the book by Jacob H. Schubert, Libertarianism Today. Now this is not a comprehensive scholarly review. So far I'm only 3 chapters into it. I plan to follow up a couple more times as I complete the book. So it's a partial review. Also, I have not been sitting down with this book in depth to take notes and do some research and give you a great, thorough review. This is just my cursory thoughts after 3 chapters. Now, I bought the book largely because of reviews online that all seem to indicate this was the best single introduction or overview of libertarianism. And I thought, so not just for me would that be nice to kind of put some things in place, but it might be nice if I can recommend this book to others who aren't familiar with the ideas and might like just a single overview of the topics. So as far as that, I can't necessarily recommend it for that purpose to others who are not familiar with these ideas. I found for people like me who have done a lot of reading online, a lot of thinking about this, tend to agree with the ideas, and are just looking for something to put all the pieces into place. This does it very well. It just puts it all together into kind of a foundational, comprehensive overview. And I think for that purpose it's great. For someone who's not as familiar with the ideas, hasn't done much reading, maybe is skeptical, I'm not sure. It definitely covers all the topics, I think in a very clear and authoritative way. But I have the feeling it could be a little dry for someone who really isn't into it as much yet, and maybe they could be better served by some other introductory things, maybe more topic specific, or maybe just browsing articles until they feel like they're ready to get more serious about it. So we'll see how that continues. So far, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it as an only book to recommend to someone who asks you, what's libertarianism? I just don't know if I'm ready to make that call yet. A couple things I really liked from the book. One was the explanation of why libertarians are not conservatives or liberals, but that mistake isn't as commonly made anymore. But he does explain how in the past there were times when libertarians were labeled as liberals relative to the views of the day. And now libertarians are generally labeled conservatives, and that is not true. And there's no way I can clearly summarize exactly why that is, but he lays it out really well. For one thing, explaining how if you look at all the true self-termed conservatives who have been in office, the things they have done have been generally completely anti-libertarian. So the best examples of conservatives in office don't do these things or believe these things. And also, I think just some general things about how conservatives, if you get to the fundamental definitions, are about tradition and how things have been and maintaining a certain political way of life. And that's definitely not what libertarians are about, since there's never really been a true libertarian society, at least not in recent history or in any big way. So there's no sense conserving a way of life or going back to tradition when it's never really been that way in the first place. So that was a really interesting chapter, and he really puts it a lot better than I have here. Another thing, and man, I keep forgetting this at the time. Yes. The other thing I've really gotten out of it so far I thought was very valuable is a history of libertarianism that really laid it out from some older, 200 years ago origins, and more recently how it's been in the last 50 years. And I found this to be very interesting because he names names of, people and organizations, and really just puts it out there as far as their strengths and weaknesses. How much are they true to libertarian philosophy, and how much do they compromise, and in what ways? And I found this to be extremely valuable to really recognize that these organizations and people it's easy to find them. For instance, Reason magazine, I guess, is a libertarian publication, and I've read a lot of their articles online, and it's easy to get confused and think, well, if they're libertarian and I don't really agree with some of this stuff, does that mean I'm not completely libertarian, or what is this all? And it was nice to have somebody with a lot more experience, a lot more knowledge of these areas explain, no, here's why they say this and why they say that, and how they're not necessarily true to the philosophy a lot of times. And that's already been really beneficial. I read an article just today from Reason. I think the article came out a few days ago. And at one point, I'm reading along, and it talks, it's basically condemning government involvement and control of what we eat. There was a recent law, I believe, passed in San Francisco about including toys in Happy Meals that have a certain calorie or fat or sugar content. And so it's discussing government intervention in food, obviously in a negative perspective. But what was interesting, at one point he says there are certain places where government belongs, and he's talking about national defense and crime prevention and whatever his other examples were. But food is not one of them. And he's making this point, and I think, well, okay, I completely agree that they shouldn't be regulating the food, but why do you give all these other points as a given? Why do you assume national defense is okay in the way he put it, or these other things? So it's interesting how it's like he's making a libertarian argument, and yet he's giving up some very core libertarian principles as far as the role of government, if there's any legitimate role of government, which is an interesting thing if you go to the extremes of libertarian argument. So that's been very valuable to me to see, you know what, everybody's not pure in their libertarian philosophy, or maybe you would call it extreme or not. And just to see there's a spectrum, there's division even within the community. And I'm starting to recognize that more and be able to identify it on my own. So that's been something I've gotten, it's been good from the book out of the first couple chapters. So that's it for now. Like I said, there'll be more. I'll probably do a couple more of these as I finish the book, and we'll go from there. So this has been Daily Podcast number 23, an update to my regular viewers. You may notice a little mess in the background here. I'm not sure if you can see that if you're watching on YouTube, but I'm installing some studio foam around the office here to hopefully get my audio more under control and actually start recording for the piano instructional project I'm working on. So look forward to that, and I'm sure there'll be many more updates on those things to come. So thanks for listening, YouTubers. Thanks for watching. Speak soon.